Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. This is episode 11. My name is CY. You can find me at tokyostationpens.com or on Instagram at tokyostationpens.
And my name is Jacob, and I am Foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter as well, and I have a blog at foodafan.com.
Well, it's always great to talk to you, Jacob, and we've started our Twitter accounts because, as we've mentioned in the past, Japanese Twitter sphere is actually where the pen community is at least the hardcore pen community. So we've started that. I know you're doing both Japanese and English posts, and I'm just doing mostly English. But do check that out. This is episode 11, and we don't have so much, let's say, breaking news as we did in the past a few weeks. But we do have a lot to talk about, especially in terms of acquisitions as well. So let's get right into it. Jacob, any new things that you got recently?
Yeah, so I got a pen back from Bokumondoh from Hiroko. So I think a few episodes back I talked about how I got this new Pilot Custom 743. Which, of course, being a Pilot Custom is this black pen with gold trims, this classic styling, and I love the pen, but I wanted to spice it up a little bit. But this time, I wanted an urushi design that sort of stayed true to the original aesthetic, the black and gold aesthetic, if that makes sense. So no crazy colors or rodden or anything like that. So that was my idea. And I told Hiroko about that, so I said, could you do sort of a dark textured ishime type finish, but maybe sprinkle a little bit of gold dust? Sure. Would that work? And as usual, she took my input as more of a guideline than a strict spec. And we talked about this before, but we're like a small pen group here in Tokyo, and she feels more confident doing sort of experimental designs with our pens, because in theory, if we are not happy with the design, she could easily just take it back and tweak it without sending the pen across the planet.
That's the theory,
right? In practice, that has never happened, right? We're always happy with whatever she's doing. So, but anyway, she listened to what I said, and then she had some ideas of her own. So some time later, she contacted me and said, yeah, your pen is almost ready, and I have used a lot of gold powder. Okay, I'm intrigued. What happened? What happened here? What did you do? So she sent me photos, and first of all, the cap has this dark ishime textured finish, as we discussed, and then
black,
she used.
Right?
Yeah, it looks great on the cap, but then on top of that, she did use two kinds of gold dust. So there's this, I think it's called hiramefun. It's meant to be like a round. So right. First a fine layer of gold dust, and then some bigger pieces sprinkled across the cap.
Right.
But then on the barrel, she did just transparent urushi, and then this very nice gradient of gold dust. And it's not what I had in mind, but it's much better, and I'm super happy with this. And you've seen it, right?
Well, I haven't seen it in person, which I'm dying to do, but after you sent me these pictures, I knew that this is something that I needed to have with a little bit of alterations from yours. But I sent her a message saying, hey, so I have an 823. Can I do the same thing? So I asked her some questions about the pen, and first I asked her if the body was done with black urushi, which she said yes. But then I asked her further. I said, can you do this with transparent urushi, which is actually brown? And she said, oh, actually, what I used was transparent urushi, but because the base of the pen was black, so it looks black.
Yeah.
So I said, great. Base of my 823 is transparent. So, hoping to preserve a little bit of transparency. I don't really need it to be like demonstrator, but do want it to be able to show me the ink levels. I think that would be very cool.
Yeah.
And then on the cap, same as yours, and then the knob, I want it to be Ishime. So very similar to what you have, with slight modifications. And she said okay, and she said that that kind of a design would usually run about $450 to $500.
Right.
Yeah. So that's really, really cool. Honestly, I think this is probably her best work yet. Yeah, it's amazing. So everybody should go check it out. Jacob has a photo of it on Instagram, which we'll link to the show notes. But this pen is just incredible. It's interesting how much can be done with black and gold.
Yes, exactly.
Right, and we've had these conversations in private, off the podcast, but you've also been turning to more, let's say, traditional old school type of pens, and you don't have a lot of these colorful acrylics that's really popular with, I think, the younger fountain pen crowd.
Yeah, that's true. I have a lot of black pens with gold trims, that's for sure.
Right, and also blue, and I guess that gets into our next segment. Not next, the next pen, which is your president pen.
Yeah, so that's the next one I got. So this is an auction find or a Mercari find. So I spotted this Platinum President, a blue one, for just a fantastic price. And I was curious about this model, so I decided to buy this one. The Platinum President has kind of a weird place in Platinum's lineup, right? Because in theory, it's above the 3776.
Right.
So the base model of the 3776 is cheaper than the President, right? But then all of these special editions, and most of the special editions nowadays, are more expensive than the President, right? So the President is sitting like somewhere in the middle, and it hasn't really seen many updates. It doesn't get much attention from Platinum, I think. So for example, there's no slip and seal cap, and they rarely ever do any kind of special editions. So Wagner did one, was it last year? But other than that, you'd rarely ever see anything, any special editions. The only thing you do see are these Platinum Izumo models. So the Izumo models use the same nib as the President. But other than that, the President feels kind of almost abandoned.
Right.
So for that reason, you don't really get to try them very often. So I was a bit curious about it. So I got this pen, and I do like it because it's a little bit girthier than the 3776. And I always find the 3776 a little bit too small to write comfortably with, but this one has just enough girth to be comfortable to write with, I think. And I absolutely love the nib, and this was a bit of a surprise to me because I've heard bad things about this President nib, that it's very stiff and it's very dry and people have to do various adjustments when they get a new pen. I don't know if I got lucky, but this one has the most wonderful pencil feedback, and it's just enough, ink flow for my taste. So, but you tried writing with this nib, right? How would you describe the nib?
So, I'm not a fan of FMNBs. That's why I got into nib grinding in the first place, to kind of, spice things up. So, like, some people really get into the difference between like glassy smooth and like feedback. I'm not one of these people. So to me, I think, it writes well. It writes.
Right.
It writes.
It writes. Yes, we can agree on that.
I do think, though, that the design on the President's nib is much better than the 3776.
Right.
And I actually like the base design of the 3776. I think the Mount Fuji design is just perfect. But I think they then went on and ruined it with this hashtag.
Yeah, you often mention that the hashtag, yes.
It's like Platinum was before their time. They just decided to, I wonder who in Platinum's office was sitting in the office and then they were thinking, they're like, you know what? Let's give it a hashtag. And it wasn't called the hashtag back then, right? It was called the pound.
Right.
Yeah, so okay, let's give it a pound. Pound 3776. That's a design that baffles me because it almost serves no purpose. It's not aesthetically pleasing or whatever. So I don't know. Yeah. I think the President nib has a better design. It's an 18K though, so it means less modifications on it. From my side, as in I can't make it like flexi or whatever. But it's quite a solid pen. I would say that the pen you remarked to me that it has a really nice feedback.
Yeah,
and I agree. It's smooth and feedbacky at the same time. That's nice.
Yeah, for me, what I really like is consistent feedback. So what I don't like is, you write in one direction, it's smooth, and in one direction, there's feedback. I mean, that is like a bad IPG nib, right? What I think is difficult to do well, but what I really like is this consistent feedback.
Yeah, but then I have to ask you a question then, because for a lot of naginatas, especially when you get to the finer points, there is a certain architect-like feedback that exists on the side strokes and less so on the downstrokes.
I usually hold the naginata as sort of an angle. Maybe it's because of the way I'm holding it, but I feel it's sort of a consistent feedback from that particular angle.
Okay. Yep, that's fair. And then you have something that just came in last night.
Yes, and this is something you helped me find. So I've talked in previous episodes about how Sailor did soft nibs with an S. SM for soft medium and so on. And I'm not sure exactly when they did that. I've heard that it's sort of around, the 80s, sort of. And every once in a while, you do find these soft nibs on the second-hand markets here. I get the impression they're not very sought after in Japan. They don't usually go very high. I think people overseas tend to be more excited about these soft nibs. So this one was very cheap, and again, you were the one who pointed it out. But it was also very hard to tell from that listing. So this was on Mercari, and I think there were like 6 or 7 photos in total. But all of them were so blurry, it was hard to even tell that it was a pen to begin with.
Right.
Let alone see what kind of nib it was. But then there was this long comment thread where someone in the middle pointed out that this is an S, or the seller said this is an SB nib.
Right. So
I had to go on that. So it arrived yesterday, and as usual with these old Sailor Prophet pens, there's a little bit of a rust, usually or mostly on the clip. But other than that, it's in good condition, and the nib is in perfect condition. But also, as usual with these S nibs, it's stiff as a nail. It's a very nice writer. Again, we keep talking about this pencil feedback. This pen also has this pencil feedback. It's a pleasant writer. I love it. I only buy these S nibs because the novelty factor, rather than because they write any different. Because it writes exactly like a hard broad nib, I would say. But it's a nice writer.
Yeah. So I think these S nibs are kind of rare. You don't see them every day on the market. Right. But as you say, this nib in particular was just so affordable. I think it was that affordable in part because the photos were just rubbish.
Yes.
So nobody could tell that it was an SB was not even on the photos. Somebody in the comments had to ask them what nib it was. So if you don't scroll down to the comments, like I sent you the link, and then I didn't say anything just to see if you would, find out. And you kind of said back to me, what about it? And then I said, oh, it's an SB nib. And then I think that piqued your interest. But just looking at the photos, they're terrible. You don't know what they are. So I think you got a really, really good price on that. And then the other thing is that because it's a smaller size nib, so maybe that's why the prices were not so high, because I find that I can find those small nibs for quite a reasonable price, even like, say, the Zooms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when the last time I went to Nagahara clinic, I asked him, what's a nib that you've always wanted to make but haven't? And he said to me, I've always wanted to make a flex nib.
That's very curious, because he told me that he would refuse any requests to do flex modifications.
Yes, so I think he was talking to you in his second one at Bunkbox, where I talked to him in the first.
Right.
He said he had wanted to do flex nibs at Sailor, but Sailor didn't want to invest. So he had actually made some prototype flex nibs, and they actually sold them on Sailor pens. He said at one of the Marzen anniversary models was a flex nib that he had tried to make. And they did sell some soft and flexi nibs that he had made, but that they were not, let's say, very successful. Not in terms of commerciality, but that they didn't flex very well. So he was not happy with them.
Right.
I don't know if Nagahara was... He probably already was, right? In working at Sailor when these soft nibs were made. So he must have been in his 20s, his early 20s, back then. Maybe... he doesn't make flex nibs. I don't know. He told me that it takes a lot of hand work because there's no equipment available from Sailor, so he had to do everything by hand. He had to hammer the gold by hand and stuff like that. So it took a very, very long time. But yeah, it's interesting that Sailor had never had the understanding to make softer nibs, and now Nagahara is not willing to. So which puts really Pilot at the only makers of soft, like truly soft nibs, because the Platinum's soft medium and soft fine are
they're not soft.
Yeah, let's say they're similar to this soft nib from Sailor, right?
Yeah.
But I have noticed that when I went to some stores and I tried the soft fine, they're significantly softer because they were abused by people who didn't know how to use fountain pens. So yeah, maybe there's some potential there. So on my side, I had some interesting acquisitions as well. The latest Nagasawa limited edition Realos came in, and this is their Chaska edition. Now, Chaska is part of their limited edition, and with Nagasawa, we often talk about Nagasawa Kobe, which is the main store since 1882. But Nagasawa actually has several different branches, and one of the branches they have is in Umeda. And this Nagasawa Umeda is in Osaka. So they have their own limited editions. So not just the Nagasawa edition, but there's a limited edition for the store. Right. So you can't even buy this at other Nagasawa shops. So this one is called the Chaska, and it's limited edition to Nagasawa Umeda store. They call it this blue silver, but it's really this like muted kind of pastel-ish blue, but with a hint of gray in it.
Yeah, to me it looks mostly gray in the photos.
Yeah, but it's more blue in real life. But yeah, it's definitely very gray. With rhodium trims, metal section, and the iconic cock nib that Nagasawa has. So I got 2 of these in, and they're both accounted for already. So these are very popular. They actually sold out on the day of release within several hours.
Yeah, I saw that too, and that surprised me a bit, given that the pen looked kind of understated compared to many other store exclusive pens. I mean, it doesn't, there's not much, glitter, for example.
There's certainly not much glitter, glimmer, and flashbangs and stuff like that. But this pen is very elegant. I think this color of the blue was very, very, very popular. Actually, had this blue, and instantly my DMs blew up saying, "Can you get this for me?" Blah 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 blah. So, the limited edition Riellos are always, they're always knockouts. So, the Chaska Blue, I think the color was a huge attraction for a lot of people. So I've got 2 in, and I've got something special planned for the nibs. So stay tuned. I'll probably talk about it in a later episode of the podcast once I'm done with them. But this pen is really, really beautiful. And fortunately, I've heard that these limited edition Riellos will probably survive the Plus acquisition, at least for now. So that's always nice to hear that there's no change, and that we'll continue getting at least some of these limited edition pens. Then on top of that, I got another Pentanoto Riello, Shimaho no Akari, the one that we talked about extensively in a few episodes ago.
Yes.
And several weeks ago, or maybe it was months ago, I don't know. COVID is throwing a wrench in my sense of time. But Inky Cat Writes from Instagram, she saw this pen. She said, "Hey, can you buy it for me? And let's make a naginata out of it." So I bought it, and it was a Sailor MS. It was an old style Sailor MS with 14K.
Yeah, that can be a challenge then.
Yeah, and so the new style MSs have quite a bit of tipping, but the old style MSs apparently are they're actually basically just italic nibs. They're super sharp, not a lot of tipping, quite flat. And so I got the pen in, and I said, this isn't going to work because there's not enough tipping here. And so then so I said, you know what? Why don't we do something different? Why don't I make a monoline nib out of this? So I made a monoline nib by bending the tip upwards, which was very, very difficult because the 14K nibs were hard as nails. So I did that. I sent it to her, and she posted it on her stories. But when people saw that, I got more requests about this nib, and so somebody wanted me to make this nib, but they asked if I could do it on a modern Sailor. So I said, sure, let's try it. So I got the pen in. I got it in the music nib, and this time, what I did was not just bend it up and shape it from there. Before I bent it up, I ground the tines down, but not from the tipping as you normally would, but starting from just below where the tipping connects to the gold. I started grinding it down so that it would have a much more distinctive round circular shape, and then I bent it back up. So I have a post on Instagram that you can check out, the roundness of the tipping, and how I've tried to slightly grind down the tines so that where it connects, it's actually rather thin and small, and then the tipping kind of goes back outwards into a circular shape. So that was a very cool experiment, and I've got more texts about this, so I think this will be popular.
But so this is interesting because your approach to these monoline nibs is different from some others. So I think you also saw that fountain pen memes on Instagram. He did a post recently about some old pelican nibs for monoline. And those nibs were basically just a big blob of iridium with one flat side, almost like a pilot course nib, which is a different way of achieving monoline, I guess.
Yep. So the thing is, I actually was talking to fountain pen memes about this, and we were talking about monoline nibs, and he had seen mine, and he talked to me about his lettering nibs. So so we had a conversation, and I wanted to see how Pelican was doing theirs. So so that's why he posted that, because he usually doesn't post like pen pictures, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's another very, very interesting way to do monolines, and the challenge is to get a tipping that size, right?
Yeah, of course.
But he said that his monoline is very, very sharp.
I can imagine that, yeah.
Yeah. I think that the way that they do it is probably easier to do, because you just grind a flat edge down. But yeah, I think that's super, super cool. But, you know, I prefer gold nibs, because me being the gold nib snob that I am.
Right.
But yeah, these are two ways to do the monoline nibs, and I think the one that he posted is a more traditional way. But mine resembles a dip nib.
But so for your flavor of these monoline nibs, what is the ideal nib to start with? Is that music, or would a stub work well too?
So you have these untipped like 1.1 stubs from Yo, right? So I think those would work as well. I think anything with a big flat surface, so obviously you can't use like fine nibs, medium nibs, broad nibs, you know, those don't work. But if you have a zoom nib, a C nib, a sailor music nib, which is basically a C nib, you know, I find that those would work really well. To do the upward bent Mikazuki style nib. And for the lettering style, you know, they would work as well. The thing with a zoom nib is then I would have to round the nib. And,
so what about the music nib with 2 tines? Would that cause any problems?
You mean 3 tines?
Yeah, 3 tines, yeah.
A music nib with 3 tines would theoretically work. It's just that I have never done it yet. Maybe I should. I got a new 742 in to make a side nib. So I'm gonna make the flex nib. I think those are much more popular.
Makes sense.
All right.
You have done some ink mixing recently, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to release a line of inks. I've already got the first 4 colors down, and then I have a 5th special color that isn't part of the line. And I've got the bottles ready, I've got the caps ready. You know, we spent a whole night putting the inner cap. So, you know, when you open the cap, there's this kind of styrofoam thing that tries to prevent the leaks. So we spent an entire night trying to install those. And I've been ink mixing and testing different types of inks, mostly on Tomoe River. I'm very happy with what I have right now. So far I have a purple. They're all desaturated inks for now. Got a purple ink with shimmer called Setsuna. I've got a shading light blue ink called Kibo. This color shifting ink, kind of greenish ink, which I call Shuzen, and then I have a red one called Kizuna. And then the last special ink, which I'm hesitating to put out yet, because so I have a formula that creates these inks, but that formula is a bit expensive right now, so I'm trying to see if I can different ways to create the same effect. But basically, it's a green ink that dries pink. And so in large swabs or in pilot parallels, what this will do is it will have green halo, or where the borders kind of become green, but the text itself is pink. But in regular fine medium or whatever, they kind of just look like a very, very light green. So I wouldn't suggest that ink in a dry nib, because it would be very difficult to read, or I wouldn't suggest in a smaller nib size. What interests me is that and then a few days later, I saw this Sailor.1911, so Sailor's Instagram account. They made 3 new inks, which we'll talk about later. But one of the inks, 280. So my ink on Tomoe River looks very, very similar to what their ink looks like, their 280 ink looks like on Yupo paper.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, except mine can make this effect on regular Tomoe River.
Well, we don't know, at least from the press photos. I guess we'll talk about that later, but we don't know from the press photos what these new inks do look like on Tomoe River, right?
No, so we'll find out on August 22nd. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so that's coming out. So if you're interested in some of these inks, look out for my post on Instagram. I will release these very, very soon, hopefully within August. I've been talking to some people, potentially getting them on Shigure inks, so that will be very, very interesting. I'm looking very forward to it. This series is all about shading inks, desaturated inks, and it'll be cool.
Which we talked about this a little bit offline, but it seems more like the kind of inks that are popular in Japan than the ones that are popular, in the West.
Yeah, so you have like companies like Daimai who make really saturated inks. Jeoban obviously make really saturated inks. People are about like the sheening, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I found that sheen. I've gone through the sheen phase too, but it's, how should I say this? It almost hides the property of the ink rather than shows it. So I'm kind of over my sheening phase, although I did recently get a bottle of Purple Rain, so Diamond Purple Rain, which is a super sheener.
Right.
I think that shading almost makes it harder to read, I think, whereas shading and halo makes it easier to read. Yeah. So that's that. But yeah, hopefully these will sell, I hope. But yeah, if you're interested, the bottles will be up hopefully on my website within August.
Okay.
And then I've also been playing with my new plating kit. So I mentioned a few episodes ago that I got in a plating kit for my birthday.
Right.
Did I mention that? Okay, yeah. Well, I got a plating kit that I got myself for my birthday, and mainly I wanted to plate my gold pens into rhodium, right? But I've also bought a bunch of other materials. So I have this Mont Blanc in my hands right now, which once upon a time belonged to you, Jacob.
Yeah.
But I've been experimenting with black nickel plating, which unlike the ion plating that Sailor does, it gives a more matte-ish color. So I have plated now here a Mont Blanc at 146 into a matte color black, which I think looks pretty cool. I've also plated the Custom 74 that is with you right now.
Yes.
What do you think about this plating?
You gave me both but the black nickel plating and the rose gold, right? Personally, I prefer the rose gold platings because that's just
more your aesthetic.
Yes, my aesthetic. I think the black ones can look a little bit sort of burned.
Yeah. So the black nickel plating I've noticed also has makes this patina, so it doesn't stay the same shade throughout time. So it's not a uniform black. I think that actually gives it a bit of character. But yeah, I agree with you. This black nickel plating is actually much more challenging. I think the easiest is actually rhodium, probably because it's the most stable. And then this pink gold, this rose gold plating, I've done on yours. I've done it on a formula of 75% gold, 25% brass, but I think I need to up the percentage of gold because it still looks quite dull. So I'll up the percentage of gold in my formulation to make it a more rose gold.
Sounds good. And right now the nibs that I got from you are now soaking in some Kiboho iron gold ink. I want to see how well they hold up to iron gold.
But that's quite we would call it in Japanese a yasashi. It's a soft. It's not so harsh on your pens, right? That ink. Well,
I know that Platinum's own iron gold inks are very gentle because I've had I did an experiment before when I took 2 very cheap IPG nibs, steel nibs,
right,
and let them soak in Platinum Lavender Black, which is an iron gold ink. I let them soak for 5 months. And right, I couldn't tell. There's no visible damage to them. I think that Kiboho is a little bit more potent.
Rough, yeah.
Certainly smells different. So I want to see what happens. So I'm gonna let it soak for first a week now and see what happens, and then we will do a few checkpoints and see how it develops.
So speaking of Kiboho, I actually did my own experiment on Kiboho. So I did one of my swatches on Kiboho, and then a few months later, I ran it under a tap, a faucet, and I can attest that the ink is a true blue-black. And when I washed the paper, the Tomoe River, all the blue washed off, and now it's a dark kind of, those picture filters where you can choose black and white? Kind of looks like one of those black and white photos.
Right.
And it's very, very cool. Something interesting that not all of our listeners may know is that actually blue ink is considered erasable ink because they're not waterproof at all. But because lots of people wanted to have blue, this blue color rather than just a black color, so that's why they invented blue-black. And so the blue color is vibrant when you first write with it, but then by adding these iron components to the ink, they then oxidize to become black. So that's where blue-black comes from. Yeah, so he's really recreated a true blue-black, and that's very cool. Maybe I should make some iron gold inks.
I think also that is an unusually saturated blue-black. It's very vibrant at first.
It kind of sheens too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, plating pens, that's been really, really fun. But yeah, that's been us.
So just one more thing about plating. So in a few episodes back on the Pen Edit podcast, they were talking about some US exclusive sailor pen. I think it was that 4 a.m. pen, whatever it's called. And they were talking about why the nib was not plated. And I think Brad Dowdy had been told or heard that
it's expensive.
Yeah, that sailors' charges or sailors' own cost or whatever charging is an additional $50 for ruthenium plating.
Right.
But so that's different from what you're doing. So you said you're doing black nickel plating. So do you know anything about ruthenium plating and why that might potentially be more expensive?
Yes. I know that it's not ruthenium plating that they're doing. They're doing something called black ion plating. At least that's what it is in their Japanese literature. They call it
really? Okay.
Black ion plating. Now, the ion plating process itself is different because I'm reading Wikipedia and it says ion plating is a physical vapor disposition process. And it's a version of vacuum disposition, so I have no idea what this means, but it says here, ion plating uses concurrent or periodic bombardment of the substrate and deposits film by atomic-sized energetic particles. And so that sounds really, intense. Let me see. Yeah, so it's mostly evaporation and vaporizing. So I would imagine that because they're using some gases to do this iron plating, and it has to be done in like a vacuum, and it has to separate the ions on like a molecular level. I don't really know. It probably takes longer, and is probably more expensive. Whereas my plating setup right now is very, very simplistic. I have this plating thing, this plating gun. It's hooked up to a 9-volt battery, and then I have an alligator clip on the other side. I clip the alligator clip to a metal, and then I brush it with this felt surface that's in my plating pen. So that's it. So I think that ion plating is just more expensive, I think.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, what they do is not the same as the kind of regular plating that I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah. But it also means that their plating is more even. Yeah. So that's why. All right, getting into some news. We talked about this Amabie guy a few episodes back.
Yeah, so this was back in episode 6. We talked about how Kawasaki Bungoten had released an Amabie-themed ink. And we explained more about the story about Amabie back then. But in short, this is a yokai spirit from Japanese folklore. And there's this tale about how this yokai spirit is going to cure people of diseases if you draw a picture of this Amabie and show it to them. And for that reason, Amabie has just exploded in popularity in Japan now because of the pandemic. So you see Amabie-themed products everywhere. And now Platinum has just announced, it might be a Japan exclusive, I'm not sure, but they announced, I think, 3 different Platinum PlaySeries, or however you pronounce that model, with an Amabie illustration on the cap.
Yeah, so there's 3 in color, and then there's 1 black one. So 4 different variations. This pen is very ugly.
That ties into something that's always interesting with Amabie. So in Japan, people are rather obsessed with cute characters for everything, right? But I've never seen anyone making a really cute looking Amabie. It's hard to make it not look creepy, right? And I see that Platinum has made an effort here, but not quite succeeded. It looks a bit more creepy than cute.
Yeah, I mean, the Amabie itself is kind of ugly. I've just noticed now that on Platinum's version, the eye is a nib.
That's a nice touch.
Yeah. I can't see this as anything other than kind of a money grab, honestly. It's this like fad thing in Japan that's going on. They're like, oh, well, let's slap some Amabie onto these pens.
I would guess that this might be Japan exclusive. Might be hard to explain what this is about elsewhere.
Yeah, it doesn't have any information about that, but it's apparently to support the Kumamoto prefecture, because they were affected not just by coronavirus, but also these heavy rains in July. Right. So a part of the profits will go to supporting the recovery process for Kumamoto. So that's a good cause for sure.
That's very nice, yeah.
Yeah, it might be interesting if these pens weren't so darn ugly.
But one more thing related to Amabe that I just discovered. So Mori-san did a post, I think it was yesterday, about these new pens. But he also mentioned that he is working on an upcoming Wagner pen. He didn't explain which one it was, but a pen that's going to have an Amabe engraving on the nib.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be an upcoming Wagner pen, maybe a platinum, because usually they do more engravings on the platinum pen, so maybe a 3776 with a little Amabe engraving. So that might be something to look forward to.
Yeah, so I'm reading his post right now, and he's kind of just introducing and doing some PR for his friend Tomoko.
Yeah.
But then he's saying that the person that suggested this Amabe design is the same person that that helped them make the 2020 Wagner pen, which is the beautiful blue pen with a nib with a guy sticking a carrot up his nose.
Yeah, that nib engraving is a bit controversial, perhaps.
Yeah, so I think people think it's cute when they don't notice, but once they see that, they can't unsee it.
Yes, yeah, you have ruined that nib for a lot of people.
Yeah, maybe I need to do another Instagram story about that, because it's an ugly pen. I mean, it's a beautiful pen with an ugly nib. So yeah, if you're a Wagner fan, watch out for these. I can't say that I am, but at least I'm interested in what they do, so I will be looking out for these.
And if you want a pen with a creepy mermaid on the nib, then this is the pen for you.
Oh, and speaking of which, shameless plug here. I have one more BS nib available for sale. If you want a BS nib, which is rumored to be very similar to a sailor specialty nib. You can let me know. I have one more left. It's a BS broad, so BSB. So for anyone who's interested, just let me know. All right. Next up, we had this YouTube video that was uploaded by the Nib Shaper office. So
yes, so Nagahara did a YouTube video where he talked about his specialty nib. So the what he called the C level. He has 3 price levels, and under the C level he has what he calls the Fudde point, which is basically, the Fudde grind, Fudde de mannen. And then he has his Concord, but he cannot call it Concord, so he calls it Beak point.
Right.
So Beak point is his own Concord. And then, of course, he cannot use the name Naginata either, or maybe he thinks he shouldn't, so he calls that Nagahara Special.
Yeah, it's interesting because when he was explaining it on the video, I don't know who the lady is. Maybe it's his daughter. But he was talking about the Nagahara Special, and they made a point to say, "Oh, so this Nagahara Special, this is a technique that was inherited from your father, wasn't it?"
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's shade.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was what he wanted to have said, but that's pretty obvious then what it is. But there was another thing about that video that I thought was interesting. So he talked also about his needle points. So he's not doing a saibitogi, at least he's not talking about saibitogi, but he's doing more sort of traditional needle points. And he's saying that if you want to make a needle point, it's ideal to start with a broad nib or a music nib, and the reason for that is that you have more vertical tipping, right? So you can make a stiffer and more stable nib. And I think his idea is that when you're writing with a needle point, you probably don't want line variation. You want to write with very thin strokes.
Well, he said that steel nibs are even better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it sounds almost ridiculous to get a music nib and grind it to needle point, but he said that's ideal.
Yeah. So I watched that video and I had a bit of chuckles throughout. One of the things that grabbed my attention was when he was talking about the Nagahara Special. which is basically just a naginata. And he talked about why there's an evolution in the naginata grind. And he said that in my father's days, so his father, senior, he said, in my father's days, that was a day of the economic bubble. So people were really much more about like showing off. So they wanted, as much ink flow as possible. They want the wettest nibs, the biggest grinds, to show off the property of the inks. So that's why his father's grinds were more they say nura, which is like smooth. They're more silky smooth, without as much of the sharpness. To show more ink. But as times have changed, people more and more are trying to buy these pens to write with for everyday use, and that's why it's much more important that they be usable with a controlled ink flow. So that's why his nibs have gotten sharper over time.
So I noticed that too, and I found that to be interesting because right now, as we know, there's this ongoing Inkunuma boom in Japan. So I would have expected him to mention something about that people who get special grinds are not necessarily doing it for the everyday writing, but to experiment with nibs. But maybe those people are getting the food and beak grinds.
Yeah, I think those people are using dip pens, fude, beak grinds, etc. for the Inkunuma. I think the people who get the Nagahara special are, let's say, I think the pendum is different here versus the West in that here, the Inkunuma people are not really pen people. They're more about the inks. They're not so invested in, these are nice, beautiful pens.
That's true.
I think the people here who are like interested in having nib grinds are probably more of your oyaji style, like Mori, Fude fan.
That's possible. That's quite possible.
Yeah, but I think the way that grinds, and we've talked about this before, the way that grinds are perceived in Japan are a bit different.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, and then let's talk about these new Sailor Ink Studio inks. I found it kind of interesting because the whole thing was that they have this 100 new inks, right? And now they added 3 colors. That makes... okay. So they're removing 3 colors from the selection. They're removing 531, 543, and 864 from the collection. And instead, they're adding 224, 252, and 280. So what do you think?
Well, I think they are, looking at their sales number and see that 123 and 162 are doing well, and they want more of these chromo shading inks.
Yeah. But do you think they're chromo shading inks?
That's what it looks like to me. But what is interesting, and I think we talked about that maybe offline, but they're showing off these inks on 3 different kinds of paper, and it is just sort of joystick, which is sort of generic, good quality paper, and then there is a bank paper, and then there is this synthetic Yupo paper.
Yeah, so there's no Tomoe River.
So maybe the first one represents your generic notebook or techo.
Yeah, probably. I would assume so. And then they have weird that they chose Yupo paper to show.
I wonder if that says something about the popularity of Nullrefill, because I keep hearing more and more about Nullrefill in Japan. I mean, when we talked last episode, I think, about sailors ink blender Ishmael-san, even he knew about Nolderfill and recommended that, and Bongbox is selling it and so on. Maybe this paper is actually quite popular now, at least among the customers that are looking at buying these kinds of inks.
Yeah, and if you look at the inks that were discontinued, they're like this darker purple, there's this dark green, there's this dark blue. So these are the sheening inks that are getting discontinued in favor of these shading inks. So probably the sales figures, at least in Japan, is talking. But I'm a Yupo paper hater. I hate Yupo paper. It's not paper, some nasty plastic stuff. And the worst thing about Yupo paper is that when you write, the ink it doesn't spread, but it writes fatter on the page.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely looks very different. It looks almost creamy in a unnatural way.
Yeah, this is kind of nasty paper. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of people who love it because it shows the ink differently. For me, it's not really a writing. It's not a writing paper.
I think, again, going back to the last episode when we talked about the Ishimaru-san and what the paper he recommended, this
was one of them.
Yeah, this echoes what he said, right? Which is that bank paper and Nolderfill or Yupo paper are his recommendations if you want ink to look interesting.
Yeah, so we'll see. These release in I think 3 weeks on the 22nd. So I don't know, which one do you like the most?
I like 252 on regular Jost. Actually, all three of them looks best on boring paper. That's kind of interesting.
That's interesting because I think all three of them look the most interesting on the Yupo.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. They look okay on the bank, but I think the Yupo brings out the color separation a lot more. I'm really into color separating inks right now.
I think you are more the kind of customer that they have in mind. I'm more into dark, muted, waterproof inks. I just ordered from Juice Spirit in Taiwan the two new Colorverse waterproof inks and one waterproof Lennon Toolbar ink. So I'm not exactly the customer.
Yeah, so the problem with these inks is that I don't know what color they will be on paper that I use.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
Yeah. Okay, so probably get a bottle of these when it comes out. I'm interested to try the 280 just to see how different it is from my own ink. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Okay. And then finally, so I went to Boombox the other day, and Kaoru-san asked me to clarify that in last week's episode we talked about several Boombox pens that are going to come out. She asked me to clarify that the Pro Gear Slim will be the tips. How should I say this? It will be the Boombox limited edition pen that they will debut at Tips.
Right.
Yeah, so it's going to be exactly the same as the Alice pen last year.
But I think that's what we said, right? We likened it to the Alice pen.
I think that's what we said, but she asked us to clarify that, so...
Right. Makes sense.
That's what it's going to be. All right, let's go on to some Q&A. So we have some interesting questions. Thank you so much for writing in. We have a question here from Luna. Luna from Instagram asks, I recently found that Lamy have left-handed nibs available. What are your opinions on these? This is the only company that I have seen so far that has them. And are there any other compatible nib types? As a left-handed person, I'm curious if there's a difference in how they write compared to the standard nibs. Thanks. And then I can't read the rest of can't see the rest of it. But yeah, what do you think? Because you are the left-handed person.
Yes, I haven't tried the Lamy ones, but I've tried Sailor's left-handed nib. I think you tried it too. We went to Marsden together and tried this Sailor Lefty pen, as I think they call it. And I think it was okay to write with, but it didn't really do anything for me, because even though I'm left-handed, I'm an underwriter, so I don't have a problem with any normal nibs. I didn't feel that this one was particularly, improving the writing in any way. I think maybe if you're an overwriter, it might be more usul.
Right. Yeah. So I've tried it, and I like the idea of it. The thing is that what I was told by Maruzen is that these nibs are made to order, and they're ground slightly at an angle. And that angle is very, very subtle. I don't see why a rounded nib, being that it's round and will write at any angle, should not be the same. And then on top of that, I think that there are probably more fun grinds for left-handers. The naginata. I know a lot of left-handed people that actually say the naginata is very good for their handwriting because they can write at different angles.
Yeah.
So you and both you and Paperlate are both left-handed underwriters, so you both swear by the naginata. I've heard that other left-handers, because it's not let's say hand angle dependent, but rather nib to paper angle.
Right.
It gives their writing a special character without being invested in a, let's say, a stub or an architect, which is more unforgiving.
Yeah, I would say so.
For left-handers. So there's that, but I also think that this I did recently a King of Pen nib kind of touch up where I had to regrind the King of Pen nib for a left-handed user, and I think that honestly, as long as the nib is rounded and doesn't have sharp edges, it should be fine. And I know that Mike from the Pen Addict is also left-handed, and he says just the medium nib is just fine.
Right,
it's great for him. What I have noticed though, and we've talked about this in previous conversations, is that the Sailor nibs are not round.
That's true. They have sort of faceted almost, yeah.
Yeah, they have facets on the sides. So that's probably why regular Sailor nibs might feel a bit more feedbacky and scratchy for left-handers. I don't know because I'm not left-handed, but I would imagine that could be a reason.
Right, makes sense.
Yep. All right. So thank you very much. That's the episode. If you would like your questions answered on the podcast, please write to us. We have a form at tokyoinklings.com. So that's where you'll find all of the show notes for today's episode, as well as all the episodes that we have done in the past. You can go directly to tokyoinklings.com to find the episode that you would like to listen to or refer back to, and included there will be all the show notes with all the links to everything that we have talked about. You'll also find that there's a comment section, so you can comment individually on each episode if there are questions specific to that episode that you would like us to clarify or to mention. Or maybe you just have some feedback for us about the way that I sound today. You can also write that in the comments for each individual episode. On the website, there is a Q&A form that you can fill out. And when you fill out those forms, once you fill out the form, it goes directly into an Excel sheet that we can refer to. So that will be very, very helpful. So really, if you have any questions, I do encourage you to use the form to ask. because it helps us make our content more tailored to you, and it helps us make it more interesting. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider also giving it a review and a rating on iTunes. The way that this whole thing works is that we give you content, you rate and review us, and that will help the algorithm put it, maybe rank it high on whatever subcategory. So we're in hobbies and leisure, and it will help other people discover our podcast. And that is always very, very motivating. So we read every single review, we read every single comment, we read every single question. So please send them in. And the more questions we have, the better. The more reviews we have, the better, because then we'll have much more material to go off of even in future episodes. So thank you very much for taking your time to listen to us and to consider giving us a review and questions. That being said, my name is CY. You can find me on tokyostationpens.com or on Instagram at tokyostationpens.
And my name is Jacob, and I am Foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter, and I have a blog at foodafan.com.
All right, so see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.